It is Thursday, March 17th, 2022 at 7:06 p.m. And I'll be calling this meeting to order. This meeting is conducted via teleconference pursuant to the requirements of Assembly Bill number 361. MCE continues to promote social distancing measures recommended by local officials. If you are watching tonight via Facebook, you can see MCE's agenda for tonight on mcecleanEnergy.org/meeting-archive. We will get started tonight with our roll call and quorum. Can the secretary call roll call, please?
Absolutely. Belvedere.
Present.
Benicia. Concord.
Here.
Contra Costa County. Corte Madera.
Here.
Danville.
Here.
El Cerrito.
Present.
Fairfax.
Here.
Fairfield. Lafayette.
Here.
Larkspur.
Here.
County of Marin. Martinez. Moraga.
Yeah.
Did I hear Moraga? Okay. Napa County and all 5 Napa cities. Novato.
Here.
Oakley. Pinole.
Here.
Pittsburgh. Pleasant Hill.
Here.
Richmond. Ross.
Here.
San Anselmo. San Pablo.
Here.
San Rafael.
Present.
San Ramon.
Here.
Sausalito.
Here.
Solano County. Tiburon. Vallejo.
Here.
Walnut Creek.
Here.
Roll call established. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda are board announcements. Are there any directors with announcements? I don't see any hands. All right, we'll keep going. Actually, are there any public comments regarding board announcements?
There are no hands raised, Chair.
Fantastic, thank you. Great, so the next item on the agenda is public comment, public open time. Are there any public comments from the public?
I see no raised hands.
I see one hand, actually.
Ryan Pickering, could you identify yourself, the city you're from, please?
Hello, folks. My name is Ryan Pickering from Berkeley, California.
Great, Mr. Pickering, go ahead and make your comment.
Thank you. I have been working as a residential solar developer in the North Bay for the last 12 years. I currently work for a solar installer in Sonoma County, and I currently often work in marine clean energy territory. I am experienced with the net metering 2.0 to 3.0 debate. I am experienced with Marine Clean Energy's virtual net metering program and their energy storage programs. I'm also familiar with their demand response programs and their upcoming energy efficiency rebate programs. And I commend all of these efforts as we continue to decarbonize our economy. Over the last 12 years in renewable energy, I have discovered that 100% renewable energy is possible. I studied at Stanford University under Dr. Mark Z. Jacobson, who talks a lot about how we can create a 100% renewable economy. And I do believe it is possible to decarbonize electricity using renewable energy. But in my research and the research of other experts, it does look like we'll have to overbuild renewable energy capacity by 600% in order to offset the 100% needs of the United States. And I believe that this is an overbuild of renewable energy that's not necessary, because we have one other grid resource that we don't like to talk about, and that grid source is nuclear energy. And nuclear energy is supported by the President of the United States and the Department of Energy. It was discovered in Chicago, Illinois in 1942, and California enjoys a nuclear powered grid today, and all of our buildings in PG&E territory, including Marin Clean Energy, are 20% powered by Diablo Canyon Power Plant. Last week, myself and other nuclear advocates used a projector to project a message to Marin Clean Energy on their headquarter building in San Rafael, and we released that publicly. And I appreciate the Marin Clean Energy comms team reaching out to me and inviting me to this meeting so I can say my piece. And what I've learned is that we need nuclear energy. It's not just young people saying it, it's a lot of experts saying it as well. I changed my mind about nuclear energy when I read this book, Shorting the Grid, The Hidden Fragility of Our Electricity Grid by Meredith Angwin. It came out last year, and it describes what we've done in California, which is build a hybrid grid of solar, wind, water, energy storage, and most of all, natural gas, which powers over 50% of our grid. And what she points out in her research is that using a gas turbine for renewable backup requires more gas per kilowatt hour than running the turbine steadily. Moreover, a grid, large or small, needs as much quick reacting fossil capacity as it has intermittent renewable capacity. I used to believe in 100% renewable powered grid, but I now must advocate for a combination of nuclear and renewables in order to decarbonize all of our economy, not just electricity. And so I urge Marin Clean Energy to use their influence to push PG&E to sell the plant to a viable buyer and keep this nuclear power plant running so that we can continue our clean energy traditions in this state, so we can have energy security and we can use that electricity, as the Stanford MIT paper describes that was released 6 months ago, that we can use the excess electricity from that plant to create clean water and hydrogen.
Go ahead and wrap your comment up, please.
Thank you, everyone, for hosting me here, and I appreciate the opportunity to share my ideas.
Thank you so much for joining us. Any other public comment?
I see no additional hands raised. Oh, there is one. Brendan Pittman.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Hi, Brendan Pittman, ratepayer in the East Bay and advocate for clean energy that is affordable, reliable, carbon-free, and resource efficient. Qualities I think many of you also share. I'd like to begin with a quote from an article from your own website titled, "What's the difference between carbon-free and renewable energy?" Quote, "When energy sources are labeled carbon-free, the energy is produced by a resource that generates no carbon emissions, such as nuclear or large hydroelectric. Although these resources help reduce greenhouse gas emissions, they may impact the environment or the economy," end quote. Impact the environment or the economy. I'd like to ask all of you this and the ratepayers that you represent. What are the acceptable environmental and economic impacts to generate clean energy? How much land is acceptable to be cleared to make way for the wind and solar resources that you are currently procuring in the process of planning to procure, and that will be built in the future to provide the 100% renewable energy landscape? Is it acceptable to throw away solar panels in our landfills as they are currently being done now? Should MCE bear some of that waste responsibility? Rates are at an all-time high. California ratepayers pay twice as much for electricity than the average American. How much more are we going to ask Marin Clean Energy ratepayers to pay as we continue to transition into a 100% carbon-free energy landscape. I'd just like to reiterate the comments just made by Mr. Pickering. I believe nuclear power is a very affordable electricity source, one that has been, particularly Diablo Canyon, that has been reliably powering Northern California for 40 years. It's environmentally efficient, and the waste streams are fully contained and we know what to do with them. Moreover, we have eyes on them. So I'd just like to end with that and urge you to consider adding nuclear power into your procurement. And that's all I have to say. Thank you for your time and have a good night. Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Pittman. Are there any other public comments?
I see no hands. Sorry.
All right. Thank you to all those who made comments tonight. We do appreciate your engagement, so thank you. The next item on the agenda is a report from our Chief Executive Officer.
Great, thank you very much. I'd like to start off on a bit of a somber note to acknowledge the passing of Doug Wilson, who was a frequent participant in MCE's board and committee meetings over the last many years. And I just wanted to say a little bit about Doug because he passed away a couple of weeks ago. He was born and raised in the Bay Area and was an active member of the Marin Conservation League since the 1980s. And he also served previously on the Fairfax Town Council as mayor and on the Marin County Open Parks, Open Space and Cultural Affairs Commission. He also chaired the Marin County Solid Waste Advisory Committee and represented Marin on the Metropolitan Transportation Committee. In his free time, he had a passion for pursuing art, and one of his recent ceramic sculptures won top honors at the Marin County Fair. He is remembered by our staff and board members as being very hungry to learn. He often engaged in our board and committee meetings with a lot of good, thoughtful questions, and really was a bridge builder in the community, looking to bring folks together and find answers and find common solutions. So just wanted to acknowledge the great contributions of Doug Wilson, and I know his contributions will live on through our work going forward. Next, I wanted to turn to some of our procurement transactions, just to give the board a heads up about some of these that are on the way and will be executed in the coming weeks or months. We have a multi-year system resource adequacy transaction underway, another multi-year carbon-free energy transaction, multi-year carbon-free, an upcoming hedge resource request for offer that will be coming up soon for a hedge transaction. And then last of all, a multi-year power content category 1, which means renewables that are bundled, a multi-year sales agreement that will be able to serve the disadvantaged community green tariff program for Clean Power San Francisco, Clean Power SF. And that transaction is just in its final stages of getting wrapped up. But I just wanted to let the board know about those that are underway. And then on a really exciting note, I've been able to announce this in a couple of our committee meetings, but I haven't had the opportunity yet to announce to the board that MCE just 2 weeks ago submitted a $188 million request to the California Public Utilities Commission to expand our energy efficiency work. This is an 8-year request, hence the large number, but it's also is more than double what we have spent to date on an annual basis for our energy efficiency program. So it really signifies a true ramping up and deepening of our impact in the community. We've really identified programs that are working well, and we want to deepen our impact through this request. So it will take probably 9 to 12 months to get a final response from the CPUC on this request, but we're really excited about it. And for those of you that have the time, I would recommend reading particularly the vision document that was included in this request to the CPUC. It was sent around to the board a couple of weeks ago. We're happy to resend it if you might have missed it. But it really lays out an inspiring vision for what MCE would like to see on the energy efficiency front in the next 8 years. Next, I wanted to note that our supplier diversity report was also submitted to the CPUC just a couple of weeks ago. And this is another very inspiring read for those of you that might have time to take a look through it. It has lots of graphs and visuals as well, so it's easy on the eyes, not too much, not all text, but lots and lots of good content about what MCE is doing to drive diversity through our workforce. And we encourage you all to read that. If you missed it, feel free to reach out and we can resend it to you. It is also posted on our website. And then a couple of other quick updates on the CalCCA front. That's the California Community Choice Association, which is the trade association of the 23 CCAs that exist in California. We got together this week and held a lobby day in Sacramento. It was a great opportunity to talk to lawmakers and to coordinate with each other and learn what our sister and brother CCAs are doing in other parts of the state. Couple of the highlights I'll pass along. The Orange County Power Authority will launch service to commercial customers in 2 weeks on April 1st, and then they'll be launching to residential customers in October. And this is going to be a large CCA. Their residential enrollment is going to include over 480,000 residential customers all at one time. So it's a pretty big enrollment, and they are gearing up for that with a lot of renewable purchases. And then on a smaller note, on the other side of the state, Auburn just voted to sign up for 100% renewable energy. So the city of Auburn is on its way to becoming the first city in Placer County to choose that 100% renewable option. So we're excited to see that happening. And then turning to more internal matters, I just wanted to remind folks that the deadline for submitting your Form 700 to MCE is April 1st. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. I know a lot of you are used to doing the Form 700s for your own cities or counties or towns, but do reach out if you have any questions. And last of all, I just want to make a couple of comments on the legislative front. We're going to have a great presentation at the end of the night tonight about our efforts on legislation. But I just wanted to highlight that we've been starting to meet with our federal delegation, and I wanted to thank Director Scales Preston for participating in a couple of those meetings so far. We are really grateful to those of you, to the board members that are jumping in and helping out on those delegation meetings. And I know I'm forgetting someone. We had someone else. I think it might have been Director Murphy helping us out with another one of those. But thanks to those of you that are helping us. We might be calling on more of you in the coming weeks. And last of all, there is a template letter circulating for AB 1814. You'll hear more about that tonight when we talk about legislation, but just want to make sure it's high on your radar that we're really hoping to get letters of support from any of your jurisdictions that are willing to do one. This is the transportation funding bill that MCE and CalCCA are sponsoring this session, trying to make it so that we can access transportation dollars from the CPUC, just like we access energy efficiency dollars from the CPUC. And that's it for my report. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dawn. And I want to actually, I guess I do have a question. Can you tell us the gentleman that you started off your report with?
Yes, Doug Wilson.
Doug Wilson, thank you. All right, well, thank you so much. And are there any public comments for the Chief Executive Officer's report?
There are no hands.
Great. Well, we will continue to continue on with the agenda. The next item on the agenda is the consent calendar. We have 5 items on the consent calendar, including the approval of February 17th meeting minutes, the approved contracts for our energy update, the resolution number 2022-04 authorized continued remote teleconference meetings for the Board of Directors and every committee of the Board of Directors pursuant to Government Code Section 54953E. C4, which is the second amended and restated demand flex market agreement with Recurve Analytics, Inc. And C5, which is the first amended and restated Schedule A2 and second amended and restated Scheduled A3 to the Master Services Agreement with Association for Energy Affordability. Are there any questions about any of those items, or would any board member like to pull an item? I don't see any hands. Great. So in that case, are there any public comments with regard? Oh, Director Perkins, your hand.
I was just going to move the consent calendar, items 5.1 through 5.3, but
Second, Holly.
Before we get to a motion, excuse me, before we get to a vote, I'd just like to ask, are there any public comments?
I see no raised hands, Chair.
All right. So in that case, there was a motion on the floor by Director Perkins, and I believe a second by, I actually missed the second.
Director Thier.
Director Thier, yeah.
Thank you, Director Thier. And are there any other comments or discussion? All right, we're not seeing any. Can the secretary call a vote, please?
Belvedere,
Yes.
Benicia, Concord,
yes.
Contra Costa County, Corte Madera,
Yes.
Danville,
Yes.
El Cerrito,
Yes.
Fairfax,
Yes.
Fairfield, Lafayette,
Yes.
Larkspur, Larkspur.
Yes, sorry.
Thank you. County of Marin, Martinez, Moraga, Napa, Novato,
Yes. Yes.
Oakley, Pinole,
Yes.
Pittsburgh, Pleasant Hill,
Yes.
Richmond, Ross,
Yes.
San Anselmo, San Pablo,
Yes. Sorry.
thank you, San Rafael,
Yes.
San Ramon,
Yes.
Sausalito,
Yes.
Solano County, Tiburon,
Yes.
Vallejo,
Yes.
Walnut Creek.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is item 6, the fiscal year 2022-2023 proposed budget.
Great, and we are going to hear from Garth Salisbury and Maida from our finance department.
Good
Maida
evening,
Straub.
everyone.
Sorry.
Yes. Hi. So I'm Garth Salisbury, MCE Director of Finance and Treasurer. And so it is March 17th, happy St. Patrick's Day. We have just some 13 days or so left of our current fiscal year. So every year before the end of the fiscal year, which is rapidly approaching, MCE staff presents and propose budgets to the Executive Committee and Board of Directors for consideration for the Operating Fund, the Energy Efficiency and Program Development Fund, the Local Renewable Energy Fund, the Energy Efficiency Fund, Local Renewable Energy and Program Development Fund, and the Resiliency Fund for the upcoming fiscal year. These budgets allow staff to spend funds within the limits set forth in each budget line item to fund MCE's Renewable Energy Program Development Fund, Resiliency Fund, and to move closer to reaching MC reserve targets by funding the operating fund and reserves. Next slide. So first I want to talk about the operating fund budget, and if I can ask the board to kind of write your questions down and hold them till we get through the operating fund budget, which is really the largest and most involved budget that we go through. So if you could just hold your questions till the end of that part, and then we'll take those questions and then move on to the individual separate fund budgets. Next slide. So first I'm going to talk about energy revenue and energy expense anticipated for the next fiscal year, 2022-23. So this is a look at the current year's approved budget, and then what we project to have actually happen for this current fiscal year, and then next year's proposed budget. So as far as operating revenues, we have originally projected that we would produce about $493 million in revenue, but in fact, we now project that it's going to be closer to $509 million in revenue. Our uncollectible accounts are tracking pretty much what we expected. And so we do now expect after uncollectibles to be somewhere around $500 million in the current year's budget. If you look at cost of energy, the next line items, we anticipated about $410 million in costs, but in fact, it's going to be much closer to $450 million in costs. So very much in line with what we've been telling the board throughout the course of this year, that energy and RA costs have been going up pretty significantly. So next fiscal year, due to the addition of Fairfield, so we'll be serving Fairfield starting April 1, and also the effects of a full year of the rate increase. Recall that we did a 0.3 cent rate increase in January, and then on March 1st, instituted the rest of the rate increase, which is an additional 1.7 cents. And so the effects of that rate increase will increase our revenues, we anticipate, to about $647 million. But we are also experiencing larger delinquencies. And so we are now budgeting, or for budgeting purposes, budgeting about 3% of those revenues to be uncollectible. So netting a projected amount of about $628 million. Looking again at the cost of energy and resource adequacy, here again, we expect it to be going up to about another $45 million or so, to about $495 million. But that would produce about $133 million in net revenue that we would then apply to our operating expenses, personnel, consultants, and so on. And then after that, we would see a net revenue that goes to our net position. Next slide. So I'm now going to turn it over to Maida Strauss, who is our finance manager, to go through the individual line items in our operating budget. Maida?
Thank you, Garth. So now we're going to go over all of our budget lines from our operating expense. Next slide, please. Thank you. So on the left, we have all of our budget lines, followed by 21-22 approved budget, then the projected budget for the current fiscal year, and the budget we'll be discussing today, 22-23 proposed budget. I would like to call attention to the bottom right of the screen, where we have the net electricity revenue for the total operating expenses of 5.8%, which is down from 6.8% of last year. So the operating expenses are growing at a much lower rate than the revenue and cost of energy. Next slide, please. The first budget line we will go over today is the personnel. In this line, we capture salaries, taxes, and benefits. We see an increase in this line, and it's reflective of cost of living adjustment to salaries, promotions, a budgeted assumption of merit increases in 2023, fully integrating the full year's cost of new staff and new staff. We see, again, on the right of the screen, we see a 2.6% of net electricity revenue, which is down from 2.7% of last year's budget. Next slide, please. Data manager. So in this line, the costs are related to number of accounts and meters. We are seeing a decrease in this line reflected of the net amount of moving some of the outsourced call center activities to in-house services, which was a savings of $920,000. And also the increased cost of serving additional customer accounts. So the net amount for there, it's about 450,000 decrease. Next, please. Technical and scheduling services. So the costs there, they are related to load. We have been able to actually go a little bit down on that one due to bringing some activities in-house. Next one, service fees. This line is directly and solely related to a number of accounts. So increasing number of accounts, we are seeing an increased budgeted amount. Next, please. Legal and policy services. This line, we are seeing a small increase, and it's due to the use of more cost-effective firms, and also the call CCA support, which continues to take on a number of policy issues on behalf of all CCAs. Next line. Communication services. In this line, we are seeing a decrease on this budget line after bringing some previously outsourced services in-house, especially marketing services. Next line. Other professional services. Here we have certain expenses which are not captured in other budget categories, such as consultants and other professional services, including the services related to the CRM software and the data warehouse. And hence we are seeing an increase in this line. Next line, please. General and administrative. The cost includes office supplies, dues, subscriptions, the support to call CCA, the CRM licenses, and load forecasting tools. And we are seeing an increase in this line because of mostly the two latest ones. Occupancy. In this line, we capture rent, utilities, building maintenance, and we are seeing a small increase due to rent schedules. Contingency. Staff is requesting an increase to 1.5 million for the upcoming fiscal year, which would be a 20% increase just to keep up with the overall growth of the organization. And that would bring the net electricity revenue, the percentage, to 0.2%, which again is lower than last year of 0.3. So now we completed all of the operating expenses and we have the total amount to conclude this part of the presentation. I am going to pass it over to Garth to talk about our net position.
Thank you, Maida. So next slide, please. So as we discussed before, we have the revenues that are coming in. We then have our energy expenses and RA expenses, CAISO expenses, produces a net revenue number that we then apply to our operating expenses. And then after we pay those operating expenses, that leads us to our net position. And our net position is the number after which all the expenses are paid each year. And then from that net position, we allocate certain funds to some of our other programs, to the different funds and so on, that MCE funds as part of our customer engagement. So what we expected originally with the current year's budget was to produce about $41 million to the net. Now, again, as we've discussed with the, even though we've had more revenues, the increasing energy cost, when we looked at our projected budget here, the next column over, it looks like it's going to be much closer to about $26 million, again, before we make those transfers to some of the other funds throughout this current fiscal year. Next year, revenues look, obviously said quite a bit better, right? Primarily because of the addition of Fairfield and the rate increase. And we do project right now to produce about $98 million before any transfers to other funds, which would bring our net position to over $310 million. Okay, next slide. Really important though, when we talk about that net position number, kind of put it in context toward about where we are in meeting our board approved reserve and liquidity targets. So we had established those targets originally back around in like 2016 or 17. We met those targets and then updated them. We had originally projected to meet those targets, sometime this fiscal year, but we're not able to do that. So, but to help put that in perspective, even with what we project to be a very good year for the next fiscal year, with those revenues and an ever increasing goal, because as our expenses go up, so too do these goals, because it's 60% of our expenses that we're trying to reach. So with that number, that net position number of about 301 for next year, puts us still below our reserve target, even if we're able to produce that amount of net revenue next year. From a liquidity standpoint, we're targeting 240 days of operating expenses. And again, with those amounts, we still come up a little bit short. So I just wanted to kind of put that in perspective when we look at next year's projected net revenues. Next slide. Okay, I also wanted to take a second and talk about the MCE CARES credit program. As we suggested in the staff report, the executive committee approved an extension of this program for another 9 months, another 6 months through September of 2022. So it was just around this time last year that MCE looked to help mitigate the impacts of higher energy costs and higher PCA increases through an additional discount applied to customers that we knew had to be particularly hard hit by COVID. So we targeted our low-income customers and self-identified small businesses. So this program is targeted towards our residential care and FARA customers. And again, this is primarily a sign-up program. So these customers would have to sign up to receive this credit, and it's a credit of $10 a month on their residential electric bill. And also small commercial that signed up would receive a 20% credit up to $22 a month. So the board approved this program to run 9 months through December of last year. We came back to the board and it was extended an additional 3 months through March 31st. And now we're requesting that we extend the program through September of 2022. And we anticipate that, again, because as more customers signed up for the program, we have more credits being granted every month. And so we now anticipate that another 6 months of the program should cost around $5 million. Okay. Next slide. So before we go any further, I think we want to now open up for questions from the board.
Are there any board members with questions? Raise your hand.
I don't see any raised hands.
Either. All right. In that case, I did see one, but I don't know if Director Dawson, I don't mean to point you out. I thought I saw you raise your hand.
Yeah, I was trying to find my raised hand. Thanks. I was debating, but I'd like to just ask a quick question about the Care FARA program and the $10 credit. Do you know what the average bill of those customers are? Like what percentage of that credit represents against their average bill? Just out of curiosity.
I can jump in on that.
Sure, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, it can really range. Typically care households tend to use smaller amounts of energy, but that's certainly not the case. Some care households have a lot of folks in them, and they can be high energy users. So I think the average probably falls somewhere in the roughly $60, $65, $70 a month. But that's a very rough estimate in my mind, not based on any analysis. We'd be happy to get you more information on that.
Yeah, thanks. It sounds great. I'm glad to hear that the proposal, and it's an opt-in. So would also love to know the percentage of opt-in.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to say, and I don't want to steal thunder of Zay. If Zay is with us, you might want to chime in as well. But this program has yielded more participation than anything else MCE has ever done. We've never had so many customers reach out and sign up for something. So we can see that there's a need out there. We can also see that our outreach is working.
Yeah,
Folks are learning about it, signing up for it, and getting the benefit.
that's great. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, I just want to add that Zay is really under the weather tonight, but we have Jared Sherwood available in case we have any technical questions.
Any other directors have any questions? All right, I see no hands. Let's continue on with the presentation.
Okay, great. Okay. Oh, I can actually just can share some numbers. I think most recently we had about something of just like 28,000 customers enrolled in the MCE Cares Credit Program. The total eligible customers is about 145,000. So, you know, we do anticipate hopefully signing up even more customers over the next 6 months or so.
Thanks, Garth. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay, we are going to continue going over three more MCE funds. The first one is the Local Renewable Energy and Program Development Fund. Next slide, please. So in this fund, it's financed primarily by a transfer from the operating fund equal to 50% of the 1 cent premium for deep green service, and also additional amounts if approved by the board. For the fiscal year 22-23, staff is asking for additional $770,000 in transfer to support the programs for this fund, which are the local pilot program, it's the MCEV, it's MCE's electric vehicle program, the local income solar program, and the heat pump water heater program. Next slide, please. Next one. One more, yes, thank you. So this one is the MCE Resiliency Fund budget. Is actually our newest fund, I'm sorry, yeah, great. Through the Resiliency Fund, MCE is working to help strengthen our communities by piloting battery storage and small-scale microgrids. Staff is recommending an additional $2 million for the upcoming fiscal year to support Resiliency Fund efforts, such as extending the timeline of the energy storage program, supporting the Richmond Advanced Energy Community Grant, and developing the MCE Virtual Power Plant project early in 2023. Next slide, please. So now we are going to go over quickly the Energy Efficiency Fund, which our CEO touched also in her report earlier in our meeting. So the Energy Efficiency Fund is funded solely by CPUC dollars. We have seen an increase from 7.5 million in 21-22 to almost 15 million in this upcoming year. We also have seen the low income family and tenants pilot program we call LIFT was scheduled to end last year, but we actually we're given an extension and even additional funding to 1.6 million for this year. And also we have a new program, which is the Peak Flex Market Program to support summer reliability, and we got additional funding for it. So for the 22-23, we have a budget of over $20 million for our Energy Efficiency Fund, fully funded by the CPUC dollars. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to pass it back to Garth to wrap up.
Okay, thank you, Maida. So next slide. So now kind of taking a look at this and the whole picture, talking about the revenues, total expenses, and then to our net. And then if the board approves of these budgets, in particular these transfers from our operating budget to these other funds, and an additional $5 million for the MCE CARES credit program, you can see in that kind of gray vertical there is a picture, a snapshot of what we project the next fiscal year to look like, which is about $98 million in addition to the net position, added on to the 215 that we have accumulated so far, to a total of about 313. Small capital outlay, 75,000, as referenced, a $2 million transfer to the Resiliency Fund, 1.7 to the local renewable energy fund, and to the MC CARES program, $5 million. So that's about an $8 million or almost $9 million transfer. The net of all that is an increase in our operating fund budget, our balance, I'm sorry, of just about $89 million or so. Okay, so I believe, next slide. I think, yeah, that wraps everything up for us. So wanted to, again, open it up for any questions or comments from the board. And happy to answer any questions you might have. Okay.
All right, I don't see any hands. Any questions, directors?
There are no raised hands. Oh, Director Dawson.
Sorry about that. I just want to say, I know as all of us in our city council positions recognize when these budgets are put together, how much work is put into that. So I just want to say thank you for this presentation. Thank you for, obviously what represents a very efficient and tight program and work by staff, and appreciate what you're doing and how you presented it. Thank you.
You're most welcome. I have to give all the credit to Maida Strauss and Efren Akhlaj, who really do all the work here. I just get to present everything. So,
That has extended to the team.
that's right.
I see Director Kilman's hand next.
Great, thank you. First of all, that was really excellent. Your presentations are very clear, very straightforward, very easy to follow. So much appreciated. Thank you for that. I was wondering, because I didn't see this level of detail, so forgive me if I missed it, but I'm interested to know what sort of long-term obligations we have, debt or otherwise, potentially pensions and other types of retirement plans that we as a board should be on the lookout from a long-term perspective. Is there anything that you want to flag or we should be thinking about?
Yeah, very good questions, Director Kelman. We have no debt. We have zero debt. We don't have any unfunded pension obligations. MCE does not have a traditional pension plan. So in that budget, in particular in the personnel budget, you see MCE's contribution to the 401A plan. That's in the personnel budget. So that is paid every year. There's no accumulated deficit or anything like that. So the budget you're looking at is, so the only sort of the long-term obligations that MCE has is with our long-term power purchase agreements. But those are, again, they're anticipated in the budgets, in our energy expenses going forward. So there's no sort of, if you want to think about it as there's no hidden debts or obligations there in our budgets.
Okay, great, thank you. And Director Murphy, if you just indulge me a quick follow-up question. Do we generally have a legal budget that we approve separately at the beginning of each fiscal year? And as a side related question, do we use a lot of outside counsel, or how much do we anticipate, and how do we create that budget? And I ask because, as these things become more contentious with locations and sightings, I want to be prepared from a budgeting perspective.
Yeah, a good question as well. Shalini, I see you're on. Do you want to answer that one?
Sure. Our legal budget is largely built on the same budget as it was the year before. We use a lot of we use some external counsel for things policy related or specific, employment law, that kind of thing. The citing and other laws that you're speaking of are typically done by our developers. And so while we do get involved in our power purchase agreement transaction negotiations, most of that work is done by the developers because we don't own any of our projects ourselves.
Yeah.
Yet.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I'm comforted to hear of a very stable legal budget. So thank you for that.
Director Kelman, this is Vic, and I just want to add one more point to your question about retirement. And Garth gave you the explanation. We also do not carry any healthcare related obligation if somebody leaves the MCE. So it's only when you are here, and looking forward to talking with the board for future bonding authority for owning something. But at this time, we don't have any debt.
It's very helpful. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
All right, any other questions from directors? Not seeing any, I guess we'll go to public comment. Are there any members of the public who would like to make comment tonight about this item?
I see no raised hands.
Okay, well, in that case, tonight's item around the fiscal year 2022-2023 proposed budget is an action item. Can I ask a staff member to remind me what is the recommended action for tonight?
I can make the motion, Chair Murphy.
Fantastic.
I have it right in the staff report.
Thank you.
Approve the fiscal year 2022-23 proposed budgets for the Operating Fund, Energy Efficiency Program Fund, Local Renewable Energy and Program Development Fund, and Resiliency Fund.
I'll second.
Thank you. There's a motion by Director Kohler and a second by Director Perkins. I will ask the secretary to call the vote.
Belvedere,
Yes.
Benicia, Concord,
Yes.
Contra Costa County, Corte Madera,
Yes.
Danville,
Yes.
El Cerrito,
Yes.
Fairfax,
Yes.
Fairfield, Lafayette,
Yes.
Larkspur,
Yes.
County of Marin, Martinez, Moraga, Napa, Novato,
Yes.
Oakley, Pinole,
Yes.
Pittsburgh, Pleasant Hill,
Yes.
Richmond, Ross,
Yes.
San Anselmo, San Pablo,
Yes.
San Rafael,
Yes.
San Ramon,
Yes.
Sausalito,
Yes.
County, Solano County, Tiburon,
Yes.
Vallejo,
Yes.
Walnut Creek.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. Directors, our next item on the agenda is item number 7, resolution 2022-05, appointing Director of Finance as Treasurer.
We're going to
Yeah,
hear from Vic. Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Don. Good evening, board. Vic Sargent. I'm bringing to you a tremendous asset we have for MCE. Working with him is Garth Salisbury. Him and his team do absolutely wonderful job. This is the second time we're bringing to you a resolution to appoint Garth as continue to be the treasurer for MCE, and that's the request. I don't have anything else to add unless anyone has any questions.
Director Kohler, yes.
Yeah, just one. I think this is wonderful. I'm wondering if we have to do this every year, or we could perhaps appoint Garth as the treasurer and until he leaves, or until we want to change it.
Yeah.
It just seems like if it's possible to do it more one-time deal, that might be better for him.
Yeah. Thank you for asking that question, Director Kohler. I think Carolina is available to help me answer that question. Carolina?
Hi, yes, Vic, and I am. It would be easier to do it multiple years, but unfortunately by statute, we need to appoint it annually. And so we'll look at ways to making it more efficient, maybe on consent, but it is an annual delegation that has to be done by the board.
Okay, thank you. It's not a big deal. I just thought the easier the better. Okay, thank you.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from other directors? I don't see any. Are there any comments from the public?
No hands raised.
Great. Well, I will entertain a motion.
I'll move it. Adopt resolution number 2022-05.
I'll second Eddie Bursan.
Thank you, Director.
Appointing Director of Finance as Treasurer. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Kohler.
Second by Eddie Bursan. Concord.
Thank you, Director Bursan. Concord. Are there any other questions or comments? All right, great. So we'll take it to a vote.
Belvedere.
Yes.
Benicia. Concord.
Yes.
Contra Costa County. Corte Madera.
Yes.
Danville.
Yes.
El Cerrito.
Yes.
Fairfax.
Yes.
Fairfield. Lafayette.
Yes.
Larkspur.
Yes.
County of Marin. Martinez. Moraga. Napa. Novato.
Yes.
Oakley. Pinole.
Yes.
Pittsburgh. Pleasant Hill.
Yes.
Richmond. Ross.
Yes.
San Anselmo. San Pablo.
Yes.
San Rafael.
Yes.
San Ramon.
Yes.
Sausalito.
Yes.
Solano County. Tiburon.
Yes.
Vallejo.
Yes.
Walnut Creek.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board.
And congratulations again to our treasurer.
Thank you.
Oh, fantastic. The next item on our agenda board is the policy update of regulatory and legislative items. Who do we have for this tonight?
Let me hear from Shalini Swaroop and Stephanie Chan.
Great, thanks, Dawn, and thanks, Ami, for sharing the slides. So those of you who've been around for a while, maybe Director Athis and Director Kohler will remember that our old General Counsel, Beth Kelly, used to always say, I've saved the dessert for you. And so tonight we have our dessert in the form of a legislative update. I'll just note before we begin that this is the kind of update I would have really loved to discuss with Doug Wilson. So I'm really going to miss him and all of his incredible advocacy. Next slide, please. So for our new board members, just a little bit of background. We have board approved guidelines for which issues we engage on. So any issues outside of these guidelines are brought to the executive committee or the full board if it's an emergency and we need a position, sooner rather than later. The 4 pillars of our legislative advocacy guidelines are to support CCA to support community choice aggregation in California, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, to promote local economic and workforce benefits, and also to advocate on behalf of community choice aggregation customers. And I know it's a subtle difference between community choice aggregators and their customers. This was actually an addition we made later. Sometimes they mostly tend to be the same, but some bills wouldn't necessarily affect the CCA model, but it would definitely affect CCA ratepayers, some issues with PG&E and wildfire liability and those types of issues. So I definitely want to distinguish between those two. This year, our major focus, both on the policy team and in the organization as a whole, is pursuing federal and state funding. And so we are continuing our strong relationship with our state and federal legislators, and a particular thank you, echo of Dawn's thank you, to those of us who've joined us at different meetings and are working with your city managers and staff to support AB 1814, the bill that would allow CCAs to access transportation electrification funds at the CPUC. And also thanks for your leadership. At the board's urging, we've really wanted to expand and staff up to meet the moment, particularly about federal funding. And we'll talk about external resources a little bit later, but internally we've hired someone who, among their many expertises, also has experience with state budget requests, and as well as an associate level position we hope to start soon to support specifically on expanded federal advocacy efforts. So we're excited for that expanded team capacity. Next slide, please. I'll be giving a short history lesson, very short, of MCE's previous legislative advocacy. We've had a couple of really exciting wins and victories in the state legislature. SB 790 is what is known as the CCA Bill of Rights, and that established our procurement autonomy. And AB 843 just passed last year, and it, as you may remember, it allowed CCAs to access funds for bioenergy projects that were previously only going to the utilities. I'm really proud that both of these victories have been MCE-led bills, and I think that really shows the depth and breadth of the experience and expertise in our policy team, which is unique among CCAs in the state. The other thing I want to note is roadblocks that we've had. And so we've had several bills, well, not several, we've had many bills that we've had to oppose pretty vigorously. One was in 2012, which would prevent key contractors from working for CCAs after they were formed. That was vetoed by the governor. That was a close call. Some of you may remember AB 2145, which tried to change CCAs to an opt-in model instead of an opt-out model, and we were able to defeat that on the Senate floor. And a more recent example is the AB 56 from Assemblymember Garcia in 2019. It would have changed many procurement functions to a central entity instead of where they rely now with CCAs and IOUs. So unfortunately, we have had to a couple of near misses there. And I think the trend used to be one big bill to attack CCAs and the CCA model. But I actually think that that trend is no longer happening. CCAs have just grown too big. There are now 23 CCAs throughout the state, and over 1 in 4 Californians is served by a CCA. So it's pretty incredible to think about the impact that MCE has had on California's energy landscape. So now the trend is not, to cut us off at the knees, it's death by 1,000 paper cuts. So we're very lucky to partner with Cal CCA to meet the need. They've been great teammates on our state legislative advocacy. But as Stephanie will tell you soon, in my decade of working in this field, I have never seen a session with so many energy bills and on such a wide variety of topics. And in some ways that reflects the rapidly changing nature of the market, but in other ways it also reflects efforts to further entrench IOUs in an industry that is becoming increasingly democratized. So I just want to make sure that you're all aware of the bigger industry-wide trends. Next slide. Most of you are very familiar with the California legislative process, so I'll just note that this is typically the process that's followed on an October to September schedule. Before this meeting, I was trying to figure out what time of year is our busiest time of year, and the answer is really that it depends. Some years, the committee hearings are fast and furious, and we settle all of our issues there in April, May, and June. And some years it takes until 3 a.m. on the very last night of session in August or September. So it really just depends on the year. Given COVID, the past 2 years have had a fairly limited number of bills legislators could introduce. But this year, especially with the surplus, we are seeing all of that pent-up demand come roaring back. And I'm not really sure when there's going to be a slow time this session. And with that enticing appetizer, I'll pass it on to our Senior Policy Counsel, Stephanie Chen, to discuss all the work we'll be doing at the state level this session.
Thank you, Shalini. Ami, could we get the next slide, please? Thank you. So at a high level, here's what we're looking at for the 2022 session. At this point, testimony and lobbying are both still being done remotely, mostly remotely. So we are seeing some meetings that are starting to come back in person, including the CalCCA Lobby Day that Dawn mentioned earlier today, which was held in person, but had strict limits on attendance. The state budget will be flush again this year with a projected surplus of nearly $46 billion, $20 billion of which is for discretionary spending. And we'll dig into the budget in a little bit greater detail a little later in this presentation. Similarly, I'll turn to a few key priority bills in just a minute, but generally we're seeing some strong themes this session around reliability, wildfire mitigation, and various ways to build out more EV charging capacity. We're also seeing a lot of bills that are targeting the need to build out more transmission to get all of the renewable power that's being generated in California and around the West to where it needs to go. Within MCE's delegation, we have currently one open seat, which was vacated by Assemblymember Frazier from Solano County at the end of last year. There's going to be a special election later this year to fill that seat. We also have Assemblymember Levine from Marin County who will be terming out this year. So at the end of this year, he'll step down and his successor will be identified in the regular November election. And then, of course, Governor Newsom will be up for re-election in November as well. So that will certainly factor into his political calculus this session. Next slide, please. So as Dawn mentioned, our top priority bill at this point in the session is AB 1814, which is sponsored by CalCCA and authored by Assemblymember Tim Grayson from Concord. AB 1814 would give CCAs access to funding from the Public Utilities Commission to support transportation electrification. All customers are paying into this fund, but only the IOUs are able to access it to support their TE programs. In addition to Assemblymember Grayson as the primary author, Assemblymembers Bauer-Cahan and Levine and Senators Dodd and Skinner have all agreed to co-author the bill, which is a wonderful showing of support early on from MCE's legislative delegation. I believe that Darlene has shared out with you information on this bill with all of you and with your staff, and we would encourage you to take a closer look and encourage your councils and boards to vote in support of AB 1814. And of course, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're also keeping a close eye on two related bills about GHG emissions reductions. As we know, California has aggressive targets for GHG reductions, but these targets are not largely enforceable. SB 881 is looking for a mechanism that would make the GHG reduction targets that apply to the electric sector enforceable. Now, of course, the MCE agrees with the broad emissions reduction goal here, but we've been working with the author's office to make sure that we can identify a mechanism for what they're trying to do that would be workable for CCAs. Similarly, SB 1158 approaches GHG reduction through transparency. Today, every electric retailer is required to report out annually on where we're getting our electricity and the emissions that are associated with it. SB 1158 would make this reporting much more detailed and look at emissions on an hourly basis rather than on an annual basis to shed some light on the most emissions intensive times of day and times of the year on our electric grid. And here too, MCE and CalCCA are working with the author's office to make sure that what they're thinking about would be workable as a mechanism for CCAs. And the last one I'll mention for now is that we are watching SB 1287, which would increase the financial security requirement that CCAs are required to post. The FSR is a bond that a new CCA posts as a form of insurance for its customers in the unlikely event that that CCA closes. Now, if that happens, the FSR is intended to cover the costs associated with returning those CCA customers to bundled utility service. Now, as a threshold matter, even if this bill were to pass as written, MCE would be able to cover the increased cost. However, we do think that the increase proposed in the bill as it stands today is unreasonably high, and we expect that the CCA community will advocate for something that's more aligned with existing policy governing this kind of customer return. Next slide, please. Now, with respect to the California budget, we're paying close attention to two energy-related packages from the January budget proposal. First is the $2 billion clean energy package, which includes money for long-duration storage, for green hydrogen, for building decarbonization that has a focus on equity, and for offshore wind planning. All of these are two-year funding allocations, and they're all priorities of MCEs. We're also watching the $6 billion Zero Emissions Vehicle Package, or ZEV package, which is a 5-year proposal including state, federal, and cap and trade funds. Now, this package includes funding to support all vehicle classes, including passenger vehicles all the way up to big semi-trucks, and it also includes options like electric car sharing, electric bikes and scooters, and clean public transit. It includes both funding for the vehicles themselves as well as for the charging or fueling infrastructure. Now, all of these proposals are being vetted through the legislature over the next several weeks. And then the next step is that the governor will issue what's known as the May revise for the legislature to consider and then ultimately vote on in June. And I'll just close here by noting that one thing that's really missing from the budget proposal right now is additional funding for utility debt relief. Last year's budget included $2 billion to help pay off the energy and water debt that customers had accumulated during the first chunk of COVID. But what we're seeing is that even after that $2 billion works its way through, there's still an enormous amount of need out there. There's a lot of folks who are really behind on their bills. So many stakeholders, including CalCCA, given the very healthy nature of the California budget this year, are advocating for an additional $2 billion this year to meet that need. And with that, I will turn it over to Shalini to dive into the details about our federal advocacy. And next slide, please.
Thanks, Stephanie. So MCE has done a fairly limited amount of federal advocacy in the past. We just didn't have staff capacity, especially with the constant barrage of attacks at the state legislative level. But in 2020, I began to take a more active role in federal advocacy around the multiple stimulus bills and creating relationships with our congressional delegation. So as you all remember, there were devastating PSPS, public safety power shutoff events in 2019. And MCE was working with all of our members to identify critical facilities, such as town halls, libraries, civic centers, fire stations that provided community services during the power outages. So MCE is working with our communities and hoping to provide funding for solar and storage as a clean source of backup power during outages. So that was the first thing we advocated for. And the second thing we advocated for was the consideration of American infrastructure bonds. Now, Garth may be the director of finance and also now our treasurer, and Vicken called him a tremendous asset earlier, but he also moonlights as a federal advocate because Garth and I talked to all of our delegation about these American infrastructure bonds. And that would enable us to reduce our costs similar to the prepay bonds that we just issued that save about $2.5 million a year. In 2021, we made very similar requests to our offices for the federal infrastructure package, both those clean power backups and the American infrastructure bonds. Dawn was invited to be part of a nationwide network of clean energy leaders and highlighted these same ideas in their featured proposals for the Biden administration. And that's the CLEAN project proposals referenced on the slide. Next slide, please. And so here's the last slide we have for tonight. Moving on to now, we've hired our federal lobbyist. Here's a picture of him, Jim Davenport. He's with Thorn Run Partners. And Jim specializes in seeking federal funding for local government entities. And he also has significant experience with the Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Office at the Department of Energy. So this year we are seeking for funding for a variety of projects, which are highlighted in the one-pagers that Jessica sent out earlier this week. 2 of those programs would need significant funding and would be proof of concept pilots that showcase MCE's innovation and ability to lead California's energy sector. 3 of those programs are already underway, and these are the Healthy Homes Initiative, MCE's Transportation Electrification Program for chargers and rebates, and our Energy Storage Program. So there are a number of ways we're seeking funding for these opportunities. The first is through the appropriations process. The second is influencing the amount of money put towards different grant agencies, such as the Department of Energy or the Department of Transportation. Third is we are directing grant applications directly to those agencies, and that's happening through MCE's Strategic Initiatives team. And the fourth is what's happening right now, which is we are beginning to make earmark requests. And these are requests that Congress members can get funding for and have to be spent within the federal fiscal year, which is October 1st through September 30th. And for that reason, for earmark requests, we're aiming for our programs that are already running, have proven results, and just need to scale. We also want to build trust with our delegation and want to deliver proven results in the earlier stages of our outreach. So where are we now? We've been meeting with our congressional delegation on these funding requests, and some of you have been part of those meetings, and thank you very much. We will also be asking for letters of support from all of you on behalf of your cities, towns, and counties. And we will be working with our state delegation and other partners, such as chambers of commerce or community-based organizations. So Stephanie will send out a sample letter next week, and Jim, our federal lobbyist, will include those letters of support in our funding request to our congressional delegation. And those requests are going out early to mid-April, and most Congress members haven't yet released their request forms, but will do so soon. So we'll be requesting for you to work with Stephanie early next week. And so to wrap this up, federal advocacy is a new area for MCE, and thank you to the board for encouraging us to go in this direction. And we're very open to feedback and input from all of you on this or any other topic we've discussed this evening. And so with that, we can end the slideshow and open it up.
Thank you so much for that fantastic presentation. Lots there, and I'm sure there are board members with questions. Director Kohler.
Yeah, I have one comment and one question. So regarding AB 1814, I just want to let you know I've gotten that on our early April agenda on consent for support letter, and hope that others will do the same. And then there was a bill last year, SP 612, for Tantino, to reform the PCI. I looked, it doesn't look like he introduced anything to meet the deadline that looks like that. Is there anything, Shalini, that I missed?
No, so correct me if I'm wrong, Stephanie, but it's the second year of a 2-year session. So the bill is still active exactly where it was last year. And Senator Portantino is still working with Cal CCA on that issue.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Kohler. Other questions from directors? All right, we'll go to public comment. Any comments from the public?
There are no raised hands.
All right. Well, any other comments from directors? Any questions, thoughts? All right, well, in that case, I just want to say this is exciting for me. I also joined Director Kohler in asking my own council to add a letter of support for AB 1814 for our April meeting. So I hope that, and I encourage other directors to do the same. I think that would be a great model of equity for energy in California. So thank you again for giving us those resources, and please let us know at the federal level how we can support. Some of these issues are so broad, and I think there's just such a great opportunity for our congressional delegation to support you all. And I also would like to ask, are there things that you all might see coming forward? I mean, I noticed a couple of the state senators there were folks who have passed some of the legislation we had to defeat in the past. It seems like there's some kind of change in maybe how folks are appealing to be supportive of CCAs. I don't want to name anyone in particular. I saw someone there who was who had a bill we defeated in the past, and now it seems like we have something that we're working on together. So do you see a change in the legislature around just the overall feel?
Absolutely. We've definitely seen a change where, you know, it used to be just Don and I wandering around the Capitol and nobody would know what a CCA is. And now, because of the large proliferation of CCAs throughout the state, they have their own constituents and their own communities reaching out to them about their CCA program. So I think that's really made the difference. As much as I'd like to credit our amazing trade association with all of their great materials, it's really hearing from the elected officials on the ground, such as yourselves, and also elected officials such as yourselves getting elected into state positions. So we actually do have some state legislators who used to be on CCA boards. So they're obviously incredibly familiar and are really turning out to be our champions. So we're excited to see maybe the next one will come from someone on this board.
Well, great, thank you all so much. Thanks for your presentation. Oh, I see a director. I can't see the last name actually.
Jordan Scolari. Yeah, thank you. I guess my question, and thank you so much, this is actually very excited. My question is around, as we are looking into electrifying our buildings from the cities and setting up some codes, I know that one of your items in there was about having like backups with basically like electric energy through renewable. I'm not sure, what are you seeing about that? Because something that is coming up around electrifying buildings is the backup. And sometimes you have like a new construction and it's all electrical, but then they are looking for backups that they are like, with gas because of the PSPs and be more reliable. Do you see anything in the legislature around fund? What are you seeing? We're trying to see the future and
Stephanie, do you want to answer that from a budget perspective? Because I think that's where we're seeing the most action.
Yes, so the budget item that we mentioned just really quickly on that one slide for equitable building electrification is close to $1 billion. And so it's definitely a very heavy focus, both in the budget as well as for individual legislators with individual items. And I think that Sacramento is largely aware of this challenge when it comes to electrifying our buildings and what happens when the power goes out, particularly since we have had so many PSPS events lately. So I think we're also seeing that simultaneous push for energy storage and to deploy more solar that is paired with storage so that you can continue to power that electrified home or building during an outage. So I think we're kind of seeing some of these things happen in silos and a few different kinds of programs that are trying to pull all of those efforts together.
All right. Any follow-up questions? Oh, please. Was someone going to say something?
I think I was just thanking them.
Absolutely, no worries. Well, great. Thank you all so much, Stephanie and Shalini, for your presentation. I'm sure you all have a lot of work to do to get some of these bills passed and get us on a good rate. So thank you so much. And thank you all for your presentation. We will keep going with the agenda for tonight. Our next item is item 9, board matters and staff matters. Any other matters folks would like to bring up tonight? I see Director Kelman.
Thank you, Director Murphy. I just want to thank staff because I got an exciting email in my inbox. I was excited today from a Sausalito-based company called Intertie, which incidentally does EV charging with subterranean battery storage, as well as solar. So they're doing generation, EV charging, and storage. And they've been very successful at the CEC getting grants. And they alerted me to the fact that an entity could qualify for both TAM and MCE rebates for EV charging. And I just didn't know if everybody knew that, but I wanted to share that because that's so helpful for our communities to allow us to build out publicly accessible EV charging networks at parks and other public spaces around the city. So thank you all for your hard work. And I just wanted to share that information with other board members.
Fantastic news. Thank you for sharing. Any other board or staff matters? All right, well, it's 8:30. I'm not saying anything, so I will, I think I have to ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll move to adjourn. Eddie Bursan.
Yeah.
I'll second.
As a friendly amendment, Director Bursan, would you mind adjourning in memory of Doug Wilson?
Absolutely.
Thank you. There's a motion and a second by Director Kohler. All right. Thank you so much. That's a friendly move. I don't think we have to vote on it, right?
Yeah.
Well, thank you all tonight. Thank you for having me.
Everyone's in agreement.
And happy St. Patrick's Day. Enjoy your weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody.